Let's talk about Salman Rushdie, which relates obviously very much to this. And Mr. Rushdie, I want to give a brief, top to all of this because some of you may not even know who this person was or what the background is. So Salman Rushdie is kind of a famous figure because all the way back in the 1970s and 80s, he wrote a book called The Satanic Verses. Now, in the Satanic Verses, there were provocative passages written. It's like a fictionalized work about Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, and more. Now, this recalls like very previous controversies from the mid-2000s around like Charlie Hebdo and like Danish cartooners who would draw the Prophet Muhammad in likeness, or, that guy who was going to burn a Quran. Anyway, they were denounced by Muslim extremists. Rushdie is important because an actual fatwa was issued against his life by the Ayatollah of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini. Now, the reason that matters is the fatwa is essentially like a license to kill or like a sanctioned death by an Islamic cleric. Mr. Rushdie has essentially been under security guard since that time for, decades now?
Yeah, since 1989.
1989, that's right. Since he's had protection either by the U.S. government or various police authorities, he's essentially been traveling the world. Rushdie himself is a free speech absolutist, somebody who has really stood up and given the middle finger both to the Iranian regime, but to anybody who criticized him. And I do think it's actually worth remembering. A lot of people in this country criticized him at the time for writing the Satanic Verses, including former President Jimmy Carter. They're like, this is needlessly provocative. Look, I mean, the man can write whatever he wants. And if people are so sensitive that they're going to issue a literal license of death over it, then I think they're the idiots. So what happened is Rushdie was in New York. He was giving a speech and actually was going to discuss some of these themes when he was actually attacked by a 24-year-old man who was in attendance in the audience. So we have a little bit of the video from that incident. I'm going to speak over it. You can see here, let's go ahead and put it up there, guys, which is that all of these people who are rushing over to Mr. Rushdie's aid, this happened right before the event was actually set to take place. This gentleman, the 24-year-old, got up out of the crowd, rushed the stage, which calls into a question a lot about what exactly was happening with the security procedures, and was repeatedly seen. At first, they identified it as punching, but eventually was identified as stabbing Rushdie repeatedly all throughout his body. Rushdie was stripped and given medical attention. Was actually airlifted away from the venue to a nearby hospital. The update that we've gotten from his family is that he is likely to lose an eye. He is on his way to recovery. He was in the ICU in critical condition.
He's lucky he survived.
He's very, very lucky to be alive, but he's an old man. He's in his 70s, so it's not exactly going to be an easy road. Now, the actual guy who went ahead and attacked Rushdie, let's put this up there. This is reporting from Vice News that just broke last night. The 24-year-old was accused of stabbing Rushdie, had been in, quote, direct contact with members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on social media. That is according to European and Middle Eastern intelligence officials who told Vice World News. Now, this morning, we got some even more interesting information, which is that the attacker's mother. So this attacker, he was actually raised here in New Jersey. His name was Hadi Matar. He himself was raised in a secular household. His mother has said that he became a, quote, moody introvert after returning from a trip to the Middle East in 2018. And Krystal, you were telling me from reading the interview, he's an odd guy in that he really didn't have a lot going on in his life, went to the Middle East in 2018, came back, started living in the basement, became very strange,
like
strange from his family. This is a classic story for ISIS. People, I studied a lot of this, which is that these guys like disaffected, raised in the West, get some sort of tangential connection to their quote unquote heritage, withdraw from, secular life that they're raised in, basically radicalize themselves online. According here, at least to Vice, he had some contact with the IRGC or with IRGC representatives or probably enthusiasts or whatever cutouts on social media, which inspired him to go and carry out this final fatwa against Salman Rushdie. I mean, what strikes me is he's only a 24-year-old. I mean, he's so young. So he was not even alive when I was not even alive when Cytonic Versus and Fatwa and all. So it's such like a long-standing.
Right.
I mean, you know, when it first happened, I was like, I can't even believe this. This is a story out of 1995.
Right.
You know?
Right. I had to go back and
exactly. I was like, oh my God.
What? Yeah.
I mean,
the controversy?
Obviously I'd always known, you know, Salman Rushdie, but I mean, this is really something which, if you're Gen X or a boomer, like you're much more likely to be familiar with. So that's the state of play. Now, to be clear, the IRGC connection and more has not been confirmed by the United States. The Justice Department or nobody has yet indicted him for terrorism. And, you know, actually, let's go ahead and put the last element up there, please, on the screen, because I think that this, D4, please, because it actually connects to this story, which is that days before the attack, the Justice Department actually charged Iranian individuals in a plot to both kill John Bolton and also to target former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So this was seen as retaliation for the strike that killed Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of the IRGC. I also think it's important for us to explain the structure of Iran. Iran's government is kind of insane in order to try and understand from a Western perspective. You have the Ayatollah, who is like the spiritual leader of the country. You have the IRGC, which is actually fully separate from the rest of the Iranian military and political regime. They only answer to the Ayatollah, and they're much more, they have their own aims in the government and also in the economy and more, aside from the actual political leadership. And you know, you could call that a democracy if you want in terms of who exactly gets to get elected. Then you have like these council of clerics, and then you have an actual quasi-parliament. So anyway, these all kind of answer to the Ayatollah, but they're very distinct and separate from one another. The IRGC itself is probably the best known for our purposes as the major opponents to any Iranian nuclear deal, largely because, well, both they are extremist in terms of their ideology, but as I understand it, they make a hell of a lot of money doing smuggling operations going around sanctions. Like, sanctions to them are the best thing that's ever happened because they control in and outflow.
They profit off of the black market.
Exactly. So they have been trying desperately in order to make sure that no new Iran deal or any friendly relationship with the West goes forward. Also, they get a lot of money for, you know, missile development and all that stuff, things that we've been viewing for over the years. So I think that probably explains the domestic political condition as to why they're trying to sink any opportunity at some sort of new Iran deal domestically. Obviously, look, I mean, we should believe extreme people when they are. They literally want to kill John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and clearly have sanctioned, or at least are okay with and are celebrating this hit on Salman Rushdie. They have come out and said, no, we didn't have anything to do with it. We'll see what the ultimate indictment is.
Yeah, but some of the newspapers in Iran were celebrating this.
Of course, I mean, they were like, yeah, they basically are like, he got what he deserved. I think we should just, you know, before we even comment any further, we should listen to a little bit about what Salman Rushdie himself had to say about free speech and its importance to a civilized society. Let's take a listen.
And now, the moment somebody says, yes, I believe in free speech, but I stop listening. No, because you know, I believe in free speech, but people should behave themselves. I believe in free speech, but we shouldn't upset anybody. I believe in free speech, but let's not go too far. The point about it is the moment you limit free speech, it's not free speech. The point about it is that it's free.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. So,
and this is a man who's risked his life for free
he's lived
speech.
his life literally under, I mean, the majority of his adult life at this point has been spent under guard for writing a novel. Like, come on, this is stuff that drives me insane.
Total
And
insanity.
as I said, there are a lot of people in this country who were like, wow, we were responsible at the time, who have shamed themselves for basically standing up for the Iranian regime, saying, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Look, the guy can do what he wants. And actually, our producer reminded us, Krystal, he signed that Harper's letter, remember, in 2020.
I had forgotten that.
Kind of the last time that his name kind of came up in contemporary circles. He really was almost a forgotten figure.
And that lent a lot of weight to that letter. I mean, the fact that his name was on it, you know, gave it a lot of sort of intellectual heft and made it land with the force that it did. I think it's important, as you note, in terms of the context, you know, that The Biden administration, I'm very critical of how they have handled the negotiations to restart the JCPOA, or the Iranian nuclear deal. We were the ones who walked away from it under the Trump administration, and now we're, placing all sorts of demands on the Iranian regime when we're the ones who walked away. They could have gotten back in from the beginning. The political conditions in Iran and also here domestically were better at that time for them to re-enter the agreement. And now, you have opened the process up for rogue independent elements like the IGRC to potentially sort of meddle and try to keep this thing from coming together. And it's important to recognize that context, even as we, should continue to make clear we don't know if there was a direct connect here or not, even though we know that, he was potentially, according to the reporting, in touch with some elements there. That's not a definitive conclusion. But the context here that there was recent reporting that there was progress on the nuclear deal, I think is important to understanding what happened here. Bottom line is we hope that Salman Rushdie continues to improve and recover. This is a horrific attack. The last thing I'll mention here is, this was such a hot and dangerous situation that actually the novel's Japanese translator was stabbed to death.
Yeah.
Its Italian translator was badly wounded. In '93, the Norwegian publisher was shot 3 times outside of his home in Oslo and seriously injured. So this fatwa that was issued in 1989 has already maimed and claimed lives. And it's just, it's completely insane and indefensible. And we, wish him the best, wish him a speedy recovery.
I really do. He's an old man already. He literally is going to lose his eye. And look, I think the best thing he could do whatever he wants, but I think that he should come out and, again, forcefully, stand by his principles. And I think all Americans should be able to stand behind him in a time like this.
Indeed. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.